Let's go over a quick update today. Excuse me for being sweaty as shit. I've actually just finished my session. And then we're gonna go over some questions that you guys sent over on the Instagram story thing. So I am currently on the 4th week of this mesocycle. This is my third mesocycle of the off season. The past two have been like much longer. So I guess that was around like 6 to 8 weeks for each one. And then this one is just a 4-week one. And I guess I just wanted to talk about something which I like doing maybe like 3 to 4 times a year, and that is an extended deload. So if you guys are wondering what a deload is, well, I've already made a video on that. You guys can check it out if you're not sure what I'm talking about. But if you already know what a deload is, I'm just gonna talk about like this whole extended deload thing. So a standard deload for me would be somewhere around 5 to 7 days, and I will usually drop my intensity maybe like by 2-ish reps, and or maybe reduce my sets from 3 to 4 sets to 2 sets. Now for an extended deload, it's sort of the same thing, except it goes on a little bit longer. So that would be somewhere around like 10 to 14 days, and that would usually be even more, I don't want to say it this way, but even more half-assed than your usual deload. So this is something that I've been doing mainly to address like burning out, and I don't know, it's been very helpful these past few years for me. Just giving myself 10 to 14 days of like, just really trying not to bodybuild so much, and that includes, well, one, my diet. So for that, at least for that little extended period of time, I will try to just not track, and that's sort of okay for me right now, because at this point I'm actually pretty tired of eating. So if I just let myself eat intuitively at this point, I will likely find myself eating somewhere around maintenance, or somewhere maybe less, maybe more, but probably not too far off. And again, this is just to help me with this whole burnout thing, which does happen quite often, especially if you're pushing consistently week after week, and you're making progress with both your training and with your with your nutrition. So just to make that clear, 10 to 14 days of minimal diet, nutrition restrictions, tracking, just trying to eat intuitively. I'll still try to get my protein, and that's for sure, but I'm not really gonna force myself to eat the usual 3,300-ish calories. And this is good. This works because, again, I am peak-ish off-season weight, and I don't want to actually eat so much anymore. And this is also gonna be happening at the same time as this extended training deload, which means with less effort in training, I will likely have even less of an appetite, and it only makes sense for me to reduce my calories by a bit. Now for training, it's going to be, again, 1.5 to 2 weeks of really just going to the gym. I'm not going to come into the gym to train. I'm actually just going to go and work out, if that makes sense. So it's going to be a lot less pressure, a lot less structured. I'm actually just going to try to bring myself to the gym to train maybe like 3 to 4 times in those 2 weeks, and I'm probably just gonna come in to get a pump or just a light-ish workout, maintenance volume for sure. I don't think I'll be pushing that much. Definitely not going to try progressing my lifts. I'm actually gonna maybe try to play around with lifts that I haven't done in a while. And the reason I'm doing this whole longer deload or longer period of half-assing my lifting and my bodybuilding is because, honestly, like a regular deload, which lasts around 5 to 7 days, aside from recovery, I think the other goal of that is to transition into your next mesocycle, which means you're going to be keeping in those lifts. You're going to try to keep your technique, you're going to try to maintain your strength for the next, for the following weeks. But in the end, it still leads to, more lifting, more progress. And what happens is that, of course, you're going up with like your volume or your intensity or your, you know, your progressive overload. You go a little bit down for your deload, and you keep going up, you keep going up, and you keep going up. And honestly, the more you do that, I think it's pretty obvious, but it gets harder and harder, like the stronger you get, especially when you're at your peak in terms of your off season, in terms of your body weight, in terms of the loads you're moving and number of reps and everything. So that fatigue builds up, not just physically, but also, you know, psychologically, having that pressure to keep having to push, to keep having to progress week after week after week. So hopefully after these next 2 weeks, similar to how I've done this in the past maybe 2-3 years, I should be feeling very, very refreshed. I will not be surprised if I'm feeling a little weak. Once I come back, I'll have to adjust again, I'll have to transition properly, but this will give me a lot of room to, say, realign like which movements I want to play around with this time. I'll also definitely be feeling much more recovered, especially from the fatigue that has accumulated over the past, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, ever since starting this off season. Now we're moving on to the Q&A. So I'll just go over some of the questions. I'm not gonna go through all of them. Let me pick some decent ones out, because there are always some shitty ones. So the first one is, have you tried taking thermogenics, and if yes, did it make cutting slightly faster? And I have tried thermogenics in the past. That was like very early on into my lifting. I think that was like my first to second years of lifting. That was me as a noob, wasn't really doing bodybuilding so much. That was just me trying to lose weight. And honestly, no. I mean, it might have made it faster in a sense that because I was taking fat burners or like these thermogenics, I was more invested into fat loss. I've literally paid more money to lose fat, so I had to focus a bit more on other things, you know. I had to focus more on nailing my diet, doing my cardio, just to make sure that at least at the time it wouldn't go to waste. So in that sense, I guess yes, it did help me with fat loss. But then once I did try these thermogenics, when I was a little bit more serious, a little more knowledgeable on fat loss, no, I don't think it made a difference. So if you're nailing your nutrition, if you're getting your steps or your activity from your cardio, and you're training well, then you will likely lose fat at the same rate with or without these thermogenics. The next one here is pretty weird. Do you do online coaching? Yes, I do online coaching. I am focusing right now on competition clients, but for this year, it looks like it's going to be a busy year for me on the non-fitness side. So I will not be taking any more clients for this year. In fact, I'm not even sure if I will have time next year to take in new clients. So just, you know, just wait for me to announce that on my Instagram if I ever open up any new slots. But for now, just you know, go look for another coach. Favorite ways to cook chicken breast? That is most definitely brining my chicken. 5% brine, I guess. So 5% of the water you're using is salt. Mix that up, make sure the salt is dissolved. Throw in the chicken. I actually do this with chicken breast, chicken thighs. I also do this with like pork. So pork chops, pork tenderloin. Sometimes beef, but not usually. So yes, chicken and pork, usually I throw that in the brine overnight in the fridge. And then the next day, you know, just pan fry it. Actually, it still works with whatever else or however else you want to cook the chicken or the pork. But for me, just to keep it simple, I like just pan fry my chicken with, you know, spray oil and some pepper. Okay, this is interesting. So this next question is, so when you compete in untested shows, what is your ideal look like? To be extremely shredded, or do you maintain a little more body fat to appear more full and keep up with the enhanced competitors? This is something that I've actually been sort of struggling with for the past season at least, because that's probably the only time I actually legitimately competed in untested shows. I think I did lean a bit more towards the fuller side. So I didn't, because I did these shows, these untested shows earlier on in my season, I wasn't even at that, that super shredded point, which made more sense, I guess, with the timing, with the scheduling of the shows. So because I did it earlier on, I wasn't as peeled as I needed to be for a natural show, but that did allow me to come into these shows fuller. And I think this did pay off, but I'm not sure, because in local untested shows, I do think they don't chase conditioning as much. I mean, it's nice to have abs. It's weird because I think like the local shows, they look for deep ripped abs. They just want to make sure you don't have, jiggling fat. But they're also looking for vascularity, and that is not exactly fat loss or signs of being very shredded. But I feel like that's their only metric for looking at conditioning. So they're not really looking for shredded glutes. I mean, it's probably nice to have them there, to have them see shredded glutes, but at the same time, it's not their primary criteria for conditioning. So for these shows, I did just come in fuller. I did just come in as I was without really trying to deplete or anything. I just gave myself a refeed the day before or the 2 days leading up to the show, and then for the show I was also loading up during show day, and I think that did turn out well. So for local shows, local untested shows specifically, I guess if you have enough muscle mass that it actually matters, you probably could chase fullness over conditioning, at least over extreme conditioning. You still have to meet a standard, you still have to meet a minimum level of conditioning, but at the same time, you don't want to have to chase extreme conditioning for shows in which judges and your other competitors aren't actually looking for extreme detail and shreddiness. Lower day exercise staples. I actually have 2 lower body days now. Actually, I've almost always had 2 lower body days, except when I was doing, say, a full body split or like an upper lower split, in which I'd have to split it up differently. But for now, since I'm doing push-pull legs, upper lower, I have them twice. And for one of those days, I do one heavy-ish hinge followed by calves and leg extensions, and I think that's it for that lower day, plus maybe some abs. And then for the second day, it's a squat variation plus a leg curl plus more calves. That's just for me. For other people, I guess you could throw in a heavy free weight hinge. Make sure you have a leg curl, either lying or seated, but personally I prefer seated. You might also want a leg extension in there somewhere, and you definitely want to have a squat-ish pattern or like a heavy multi-joint quad exercise. So that might be a barbell / Smith squat, or it could even just be a leg press. And of course, don't forget to train your calves. I mean, I know a lot of us don't necessarily like training calves, but it's something you will have to train regardless of where you're competing, because even in men's physique, they will be looking at your calves, and for bodybuilding, it's definitely going to look out of place if your quads, your hams, your glutes are huge and your calves are not. So those are my staples for a lower body session. How to transition from a cut to a bulk. I guess this is just my personal preference, and that is I like going straight into a surplus. Not in like a super big surplus. I just try to go from maybe that deep deficit. And that's usually what happens. Like I'll usually kick myself into a deep deficit, and then I'll push myself into maybe like 200 to 300 calories above what I think my maintenance is. And then I'll do that for maybe like 3 to 4 weeks, and then I proceed to just pushing body weight up with sort of aggressive surplus. Okay, this is new. So did you develop your photography hobby before or after getting into bodybuilding? Actually, I was sort of into it even before bodybuilding, even before I got into fitness, but I didn't really get to move around so much. I didn't like walking around, going places to take photos. So I just couldn't really keep up the hobby. But recently, especially during this past prep, where I did have to take steps every day, I just liked having my camera around and just taking photos, and that definitely helped me because it gave me more reasons to go out, gave me more reasons to get my steps in, and this was super consistent for me. Like, I just bring my camera around every day, walking to the gym, walking back, and I would take maybe a couple extra detours just to get the 10 to 13 to sometimes 15k steps regularly and consistently. So I had this, yeah, again, I had the photography hobby-ish even before bodybuilding, even before fitness, but it was only during this past prep where I would consistently actually have my camera around with me while I was walking around. I guess I'll do around 3 more questions. So does training or just working out help you not have low energy levels all the time, like you never get tired or lethargic? This might be a misconception. I think it does sort of help. I mean, if you're talking about someone who's sedentary versus someone who's training, I will say you probably do have better energy levels. But maybe it's just me. You could be training all the time, but at the same time, you could have varying degrees of energy. So during, I guess, when you're at maintenance at a healthy enough body weight, you're doing your steps, you're training regularly, maybe you're doing some added cardio through other means of exercise, then I think that would give you like the best in terms of your your energy levels. But once you're prepping, once you're deep into prep, or once you're deep into a diet, your energy levels are definitely very low. And like me right now, deep into my off season, deep into this heavier body weight, now I can actually feel that my energy levels are also very low and I'm feeling very lethargic throughout the entire day. So it will have to depend. I mean, training in itself can help if you're using being sedentary as the reference point. But within people who train, there are different degrees. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. So if you're trying to maintain decent energy levels, I guess you'd have to make sure your fatigue is addressed, you're recovering well, you're training somewhat consistently, and you're still getting some form of cardio in. Next one here is 20% body fat too high of a starting point when an individual is planning to do a massing phase? Personally, I would say 20% body fat is a little high, but of course that will depend on how it looks on you. If you're 20% body fat but it doesn't really look like it, like if you're still pretty lean, or say if you just have more muscle mass in the right places and you can still see your physique changing, then I think 20% body fat might be okay. Now, just to make this clear, this is a guy asking. So 20% body fat on a dude versus 20% body fat on a female, that will be very different. So guys, if you're at 20% body fat, if you still think you look good, if you're performing well, and if you're comfortable at 20%, I guess it's fine to start massing or to just keep massing. If you're at 20% but you don't, there's not enough muscle there to see how you look, and you're not particularly comfortable increasing weight or increasing to even higher body fat levels, then maybe 20%, maybe you'll want to trim down, go for a mini cut, or if it's your first time cutting, just go on a regular slow linear cut. And once you're done with that, I think you will be at a better starting point where you can visually assess yourself week to week and see how your training and how your nutrition affects you. And just to answer this last actual question, this is a guy asking me if I'm nappy. So yes, I am in fact. natty. That's just all I can say. And I've been competing in tested shows and tested powerlifting meets, and I have been tested a couple of times in the past few months. Once after the NBAU show, and once after the powerlifting meet I did a couple of weeks back. So that is all. That is the last question I'm going to answer today. I don't want to take too much of your time, but if you like this format of me just giving a random update for the day and then answering some of your questions, do leave a thumbs up. If you have any more questions, you can probably ask in the comment section below, but it might also be nice if you just followed me on Instagram and just ask me your questions in the Q&A form, which I like putting up maybe once or twice a week. And of course, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the channel. Peace.